again for our safety. I'm going to check and make sure the truck is sitting on level ground and that the truck itself is level. If it's not level, that could be an indication of a low tire or a suspension problem. I'm going to look underneath the truck, make sure there's no puddles that might indicate a leak, or that there's no hanging wires or hoses that could cause potential problem going down the road. I'm going to start at the top and work my way down. I've got 5 lights up top that are amber in color, have no cracks, no moisture, serves one function, clearance. By the way, the overall assessment of the truck, there's no damage. I'm going to move down to my windshield. If you do this on the end cab, you usually don't have to mention it on the outside, but the windshield has no cracks, there's no obvious signs of damage, the seal is intact, not leaking. The wiper arms are not bent, the wiper blades are not torn. All of my mirrors are properly mounted and secure, clean, and I check them as I come by and there's no cracks. Move down to my headlights. They're clear in color, no cracks, no moisture. They have 2 functions, high beam, low beam. My corner lights are amber in color, have no cracks, no moisture, 3 functions, marker, emergency, and turn. My corner reflectors have no cracks and they're properly mounted and secure. We're going to go look under the hood. Right on the passenger side, I'm looking for any obvious signs of damage or any hanging hoses or wires that could indicate a problem. I'm going to start with my alternator. That's properly mounted and secure. There's no legal tape or frays on my electrical wires. My belt has no more than 3/4 inch play. Alternator is belt driven. I'm going to go to my washer reservoir. It's properly mounted and secure, filled to the proper level, checked by eyesight, no leaks. Move to my exhaust system. My exhaust is going to consist of my turbo, to my flex pipe, to my muffler, back to my tailpipe. I'll make sure that all my brackets are properly mounted and secure, not missing any pieces, nothing's cracked or broken. I'm looking for any black soot on the pipe at the joints that might indicate a carbon monoxide leak. There is none. Move to the driver's side of the vehicle. All right. Once again, I'll look to make sure there's any obvious signs of damage on the vehicle, any hanging hoses or wires that could be a problem. I'll start with my coolant reservoir. It's filled to the proper level, checked by eyesight, not leaking. I move to my water pump. It's properly mounted and secure. It is also belt driven, no more than 3/4 inch play in that belt as well. And none of the hoses are showing any indications of a leak. Move over to my engine oil. I would check it by dipstick and eyesight. I'll move back to my compressor. My air compressor is mounted behind this frame up here on the bell housing. It is properly mounted and secure, no leaks. My power steering pump is mounted right behind the air compressor behind this frame. It also is properly mounted and secure, has no leaks. I'm checking the hoses. Comes out to the power steering gearbox and to the power steering reservoir to make sure there's no leaks. The power steering reservoir itself is filled to the proper level, checked by eyesight, no leaks. Now I'll go to my steering. My steering shaft is not bent. My upper and lower U-joints have no debris in them. My gearbox is properly mounted and secured to the frame. It is not leaking. This is my pitman arm to my drag link. This is my ring knuckle. Down here, I've got my steering arm connected to my tie rod. Everything is properly mounted and secure with castle nuts and cotter pins, no missing parts or any cracks. Now I'm going to move to my suspension. I've got my hangers, my U-bolts. These are my bolts. I have bushings here. I've got brackets back here with bolts and bushings as well. And this is the upper and lower anchor plate. No missing pieces, nothing's cracked or broken. My leaf springs, I have 2 of them here. They are properly aligned. There's no cracks or legal welds. And I've got my shock absorber. It's not bent and it's not leaking. Now I'll move to my brakes. My air line's not leaking. My air chamber is properly mounted and secure and not leaking. My push rod is not bent. And then my slack adjuster. I would check that. It should have no more than 1 inch of slack in it with the brakes released and the wheels chalked. My brake lining has no less than 1/4 pad remaining, and my brake drum has no cracks and is not worn dangerously thin. There's also no debris between my drum and the lining. Move out to my tires. My steer tire is evenly worn. There's no cuts or bulges in the sidewall. There's no less than 4/32 of tread depth. This tire is 110 PSI, checked by air gauge. The valve stem is not leaking and the cap is in place. My rims have no cracks or illegal welds. My lug nuts are all present. There's no rust trails or shininess around them that might indicate looseness. This is my hub oiler seal. It is not leaking. I would check it by eyesight when possible. I'm gonna move to the side of the truck. Once again, there's no obvious signs of damage on the truck. There's no puddles under the truck that might indicate a leak from the fuel tank. I have one light right here that's amber in color. No cracks, no moisture. Serves three functions: marker, emergency, and turn. My door hinges are aligned properly. My mirrors securely mounted to the door. You must tell him that your mirrors securely mounted to the door. My hinges on the outside and inside work properly. My window rolls up and down properly. My outer and inner seals are intact and not torn. My door closes properly. This time, if you forget, you could also mention that you have spare fuses up top. 10 BC fire extinguisher, properly mounted and secure, checked by gauge and eyesight. I'll go ahead and open the side box here. As I walk down my steps, they have no debris on my steps and they're properly mounted and secure. Look to my fuel tank. I'm going to look at my straps, make sure there's no shininess around the straps that might indicate looseness. I'll make sure that my cap is intact. I'm going to check to make sure that my seal is intact and not torn. I'm also going to look at my crossover line to make sure it's no leaking. And as I said earlier, I'll make sure there's no puddles of fuel on the ground that might indicate a leak. All right, my side box, my hinges are properly aligned, my seal is intact. Here's my reflective triangles for emergency purposes. There's 3 of those, and the door does latch securely. Move to the back of the cab. At the top, I've got my reflectors. They're properly mounted and secured. Moving down, I've got 2 lights that are clear in color. No cracks, no moisture. They serve one function: a utility light. Move down to my electrical pigtail. It is secure in the electrical socket. It's got the safety latch over top. There's no cuts or frays in the wires or illegal tape. Move down to my air lines. They're properly mounted and secured to the back of my manifold at the back of the cab. There's no cuts or chafing on the lines. The lines themselves are not leaking. We talk about my cab airbags. They're not leaking. My cab shocks, they're not bent or leaking. Move out to my frame. There's no cracks or illegal welds on my frame or cross members. My drive shaft itself is not bent and there's no debris in the U-joint of my drive shaft. Move out to my torque arm. That's this thing right here. It's your torque arm. It is not bent. Talk about my suspension. All my springs. We'll talk about my hangers, my U-bolts, bolts, bushings, brackets. Everything is properly mounted and secure. No missing pieces. Nothing's broken. This is a spring arm. It's a single arm. It is not cracked or has no illegal welds. My airbag is mounted to that spring arm and is mounted to the frame with all the brackets. Everything is properly mounted and secure. There's no leak in my bag. My shock absorber is also properly mounted and secure. It's not bent or leaking. Talk about my brakes. There's my brake chamber down there. My air hoses running to my chamber are not leaking. The chamber itself is properly mounted and secure, not leaking. Once again, the push rod is not bent. The slack adjuster has no more than 1 inch of slack with the brakes released and the wheels chopped. My brake pads have no less than 1/4 pad remaining. And my brake drum has no cracks. It's not worn dangerously thin, and there's no debris between the drum and the pad itself. Let's talk about my duals here. I'm going to check and make sure my duals are worn evenly across. There's no cuts or bulges in the side walls. There's no debris in between the duals here. The tread depth is no less than 230 seconds. Tire pressure is 100 PSI, checked by air gauge. The valve stem is intact, not leaking. It has the cap in place. My rims have no cracks or illegal welds. All of my lug nuts are present. There's no rust, trails, or shininess to indicate looseness. My axle seal is not leaking, and all of my nuts are present on my axle seal. All right, move back. I would check this rim, tire, axle system the same as I would that one. Look to the back of the tractor. I've got 2 reflectors, red in color, no cracks, properly mounted and secure. I've got 1 light that's clear in color, no cracks, no moisture, serves one function: reverse. I've got 2 lights, red in color, no cracks, no moisture, they serve 4 functions: brake, emergency, tail, and turn. I would also check my mud flaps and make sure they're properly mounted and secure, they're not torn, and my DOT tape is present and clean. Coupling system. First thing I'm going to check is the apron on the trailer to make sure there's no damage. I'm going to look at the kingpin, make sure it's not bent. The head of the kingpin is not broken off. The shank, the locking jaws are around the shank of the kingpin. The fifth wheel skid plate has no excessive damage. It is properly greased. There is no gap between the fifth wheel and the apron. All right, the fifth wheel itself is mounted to the platform, and the platform is mounted to the frame. There's no missing bolts or pieces. This is a sliding fifth wheel, so my locking pins are in the locked out position, and this is my release handle. It is in the locked in position with the safety latch on the top.